la primera traducción y después continúa y hacemos la segunda parte.
Sí, sí, me parece perfecto.
¿Vale?
Si ya está comenzado a grabar. Listo.
Y listo, adelante, si quieres dejar entrar a las personas, Iris. I think for all,
Okay, are we good to go?
I really appreciate your presentation and you are a co-founder. Let me tell you something. Let me ask you something. It's how old are you, Adam? Because you have a PhD and you are a uni innovation winner the last year here in Mexico.
Should I get started, Omar?
Yeah, I believe that it's now the...
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Well, hello everybody. I'm Adam Steger, the founder and CEO of Trick Robotics. I have to give a shout out to Dr. Omar Chavez for inviting me and also for Itzel for organizing everything. I'm really happy to be here to share with you a little bit about how we're reducing the amount of chemicals it takes to grow our food. So I'm not going to get right to the science. I think it's better if I share a little bit about myself first, about how I founded Trick Robotics, then I'll tell you about the technology and go over how we're using that to do these non-chemical treatments. And then I'll wrap everything up with some next steps. And in between each section, Daniela will do a translation. So the reason I want to talk about me first and give you a little bit of background about the story is because I want to make sure everybody sees that I'm just a regular person too. You know, everybody can do these types of things. I didn't have like some really crazy special ability or something that allowed me to do this. And in fact, I'll share this slide so that you can see me as a kid. So you guys are really special because nobody's ever seen this slide before. It just shows you that I always loved building stuff. So if I did have a special ability, it would just be my curiosity and the desire to create things. And everybody has some type of special ability like that. You know, maybe you're really good at art, or maybe you're really good at talking with people. And you can use that to make a difference in the world, just like I have. And, you know, you can't always do it alone. Maybe you need a team, but starting like this is okay. You know, starting with just a bunch of connects as a kid and, you know, building that desire to build. So, you know, for my family, seeing me play with all these little toys and stuff as a kid and building all these things, it was no surprise that I was a mechanical engineer. So I started my University of Delaware in undergraduate studies as a mechanical engineer. And during that time, I ran into a bunch of more complicated and very interesting technologies, just like 3D printing technology. So this is something I was introduced to during my studies. And you can see here, you know, how you can build things. It was really fascinating for me, who loved to build things with Legos and stuff like that, to be able to think of something and create it. Really, within the same day, I can build something and create it. And I was always building stuff. You know, here, this video shows me with this design that I made for picking up tennis balls. Because for me, when I started playing tennis, I hated picking up tennis balls. So, you know, sometimes all you have to do is get out there and try. And for me, trying was reaching out to a tennis company and saying, hey, I think we can do something together that'll make picking up tennis balls a little bit more fun. Now, when I graduated from my undergrad studies as a mechanical engineer, I started a job as a project engineer. And in that job, I was introduced really for the first time to robotics. And I had no prior knowledge really of how to make anything like this work, but I saw this piece of equipment doing something that would be really a pain to do, just like picking up tennis balls. Moving these little packets onto this conveyor would really be a pain for a human. And it probably wouldn't do it people probably wouldn't do it as well because they get tired. And I felt like while seeing this technology, this was really the future. you know, this would give me, if I was able to do it, the power to think differently in a way that can improve the future. So I figured, you know, the people who are coming up with this technology, they were just like me. They're just people like me. So I thought I could probably learn how to do something like that too. And I did a little bit of Googling around and found these two communities, community around this Arduino and Raspberry Pi. And if anyone else here is interested in automation or writing your own software, I'd say that these are great ways to start. And for me, I had no prior knowledge, and now I own a robotics company. So you really can grow a lot just by taking initiative and being curious enough to look online. And you can see here, I was able to, by myself, build one of these robots that do the same type of thing as the ones in my manufacturing job. But one thing I did realize was that Wikipedia can only take you so far if you want to study robotics. So sometimes you do need to study a little bit more, and that's exactly what I did. I decided, you know, I had a good job, but I didn't think I'd be able to make the impact and learn enough in that job to make a difference in the world the way I wanted to. So I went back for my PhD, and in my PhD, I was able to make these small robots. So this is kind of my PhD thesis, the thesis title. And you can see there's a little bit about design. Maybe I'll pause that one. A little bit about design and building these small, low-cost robots. And it was actually really good for me because I knew a little bit about 3D printing. I had just got a little bit of knowledge about Arduinos and about Raspberry Pis, and we were using that technology in my research. And the robots were since they were low cost, it was really good because I could break them, you know, and I think failure is a really big part about learning. And since I was working in the university, it was okay to break things and buy new components and everything. And I was just learning the whole time. So this really gave me the background and the time it took to study robotics and work on small devices like this. So from here, I guess I'll go to this slide and say, Daniela, you can give a little summary on that.
Of course, yes, of course. Bueno, básicamente estamos hablando con Adam, que me parece fabuloso lo que nos está comentando. Él inicia platicándonos un poco de sus antecedentes. En su background, en sus antecedentes, él comenta que él es una persona regular, es una persona tan común como cualquiera de nosotros, y que él destaca mucho que no tiene ninguna habilidad especial ni nada, ¿no? Simplemente las intenciones de mejorar y de hacer un cambio en el mundo, y él enfatiza mucho esta parte, que cualquiera de nosotros tenemos esa habilidad, no tenemos que nacer como con un don particular, ¿no? Él enfatiza que no tiene ninguna habilidad especial, ni mucho menos, que simplemente a él le gustaba mucho desde pequeño crear, ¿no? Imaginar, crear cosas, que incluso jugaba con Legos y siempre estaba construyendo y construyendo y construyendo. Pero enfatiza mucho esta parte de que todo mundo tenemos, si acaso, la habilidad de hacer una diferencia. Él estudió en Delaware, él tiene un grado en ingeniería. Y eso era predecible, sus padres siempre mencionaban que eso era lo más factible para él, puesto que siempre estaba diseñando y creando cosas, ¿no? Él menciona un poco esta parte de que siempre estaba intentando, siempre trataba de innovar, de crear, de imaginar, de diseñar, y su base era pensar en la tecnología, que le llamaba mucho la tecnología para el futuro, que realmente destaca que la tecnología es lo que nos va a dar el poder de cambiar este futuro. Destaca ahí un par de proyectos. Uno muy interesante fue que él comenzó con diseños sencillos. Como vimos en el video, él comenzó diseñando una especie como de artefacto para levantar pelotas de tenis, porque simplemente eran cosas sencillas, ¿no? Que a cualquiera quizás nos podría dar flojera estar levantando las pelotas en un partido de tenis. Y él vio esa como necesidad, oportunidad, y le llamó la atención, y empezó con diseños sencillos, que incluso fue con bueno, personas relacionadas con el ámbito del tenis, y empezó a llamar mucho la atención con ello. Entonces, pues destaca esto, ¿no? Que él realmente, como inició en sus proyectos, en sus diseños de ingeniería, fue buscando y que incluso que simplemente entrando a Google se dio cuenta que habían comunidades como Raspberry Pi y Arduino y comenta, ¿no?, a los interesados en todo este mundo de la tecnología y de la ingeniería, destaca una frase que me llama la atención y tiene razón, ¿no? Dice que Wikipedia no te va a llevar muy lejos si lo que estás buscando es introducirte en este mundo de la ingeniería y la robótica, que realmente pues sí tienes que investigar un poco más, ¿no? Entonces, otro de sus proyectos fue diseñar este ensamble robótico para acomodar piezas de manufactura, considerando que, por ejemplo, pues los seres humanos no somos máquinas y de repente igual nos cansamos, ¿no? Entonces, que él lo que buscaba era justamente eso, realmente innovar, diseñar, crear, que siempre ha estado construyendo. Y pues bueno, que él comenzó con robots pequeños y de bajo costo, puesto que al estar en la universidad era válido, ¿no? Romper cosas, estaba bien porque estaba intentando y siempre estaba aprendiendo. Entonces, hasta aquí ese es el background que él comenta, que todos tenemos alguna habilidad para hacer cambios, que podemos hacer uso de la tecnología, pero que destaca que cualquier habilidad que nosotros tengamos, ya sea habilidades de comunicación, habilidades de creatividad, de diseño, que todo lo podemos manejar para hacer un cambio positivo para el mundo.
Wow, you are amazing.
Oh,
That's
you.
incredible. So yeah, from there, I had been building skills and trying to make myself better at doing something that would make an impact on the world. And throughout my PhD, I tried a lot to do that. You know, so this is kind of a list of all the ideas that I had. They weren't necessarily companies, but they were things that I thought could be companies. And I tried a lot. So I did even small things. That 3D printing video I showed you earlier, that was one of the first things I did. I knew that I could 3D print unique whistles. And I started a little Etsy shop because I knew I wanted to start something. I wanted to have a company. So this gave me some experience, and trying through that introduced me to how to work with customers, how to, you know, and then some of these other ideas helped me learn how to pitch an idea and explain it to other people. But ultimately, I think I settled on something called trick robotics, intersection of the C-Terra idea and trick, because the trick robotics company did something totally different when I started. So I think a good message from this is that you should really keep trying. You know, if you have ideas, try them and see. All of them won't work. You'll fail a lot, and you might not go down the path that where you'll end up. But if you try, you'll learn a lot along the way, and that's how you'll end up where you end, I guess. So as a good example, this trick robotics company started with these small robots. So these robots were actually evolved from my PhD work. We were making small robots in my PhD work, but they were very fragile. So they were good for research, and the ideas behind them, using them for search and rescue or for like reconnaissance missions, so people didn't have to go into dangerous situations. I liked that idea, but I also realized that the research couldn't really be useful to people unless we made it a little bit more substantial, a little more robust. So we built these small robots, and most of it was 3D printed. And we immediately tried to get them out to customers, you know, people who might be able to use them. And I think that's a lot of times the best way to learn. If you have new ideas and new initiatives you want to start, I think you should always try to get out there and see what people think. You know, don't be afraid to share it with other people. And that's what we did. So we went out and we found that, I guess I shouldn't have been too surprised because the work we were doing was funded by the military, and the police departments were the ones that were interested and willing to pay for something like this, because the police officers were going into dangerous situations all the time, and they wanted something that could replace the human in that situation and save lives. And for me, I thought that was a really great initiative. And that's why we started the company doing this. But after selling a couple of robots, I realized that, again, I was kind of I wanted to be. I wasn't going to be able to make the impact in the world that I thought was really important. So although it was easy to sell these robots, it would have been really hard for me to support my team because it was a one-time sale. It wasn't something that was very sustainable. And, you know, I wasn't really making the impact. I wasn't helping the world become a better place in a very large picture. So I continued, as I was doing this, I continued looking for alternate places where I could make this robot useful. And I eventually got this robot out in the hands of one of the professors at the University of Delaware, and she was working in agriculture. And now she said, if you look at these roots here, corn plants put these roots out to make themselves more stable. And they do that because 5 to 25% of corn yield is lost in the US every year because the corn blows over, because of the wind. You can see how it's moving around in this picture, in this video. So that to me, I thought, wow, now I'm solving a problem. Corn is one of the biggest crops in the US. And if we're losing 5 to 25% of that, that's a lot of waste. We could be helping the farmers make more money and be doing a much better service to the environment by not planting so much corn if we can get away with less corn. So I worked with the professor and we were able to find some funding and build a robot. And we did that because the small robot, you can see it kind of gets stuck here. So although I was kind of attached to this technology, another good message from this is don't be too attached. You know, be attached to solving problems, not to some cool new thing that you're building. It's much more important to keep an open mind and say, okay, I can abandon some technology that I've been working on and grow a lot as a founder of a company or the founder of an idea by just, you know, trying to solve the problem instead of working with old technology that's not going to be helpful. But you can see the cornfield's pretty complicated. There's a lot of things here blowing around. So from a research standpoint, what we ended up doing was taking away all the weeds. And for the professor, this was really good because she can do her research project a lot more efficiently. She could take pictures of these roots, and eventually her goal is to breed corn plants that are more stable, so there's less loss. But for me, I wasn't the researcher. I want to help people right now. You know, I want to go out there and really help the farmers. So I saw this and I said, well, if we have to clear out all the weeds, that's a pretty impossible thing for the farmers to do. So although this is a really interesting project, and I think that I'm narrowing my field down to a place, agriculture, where we can make a much bigger impact. We can help the environment and help the people that are planting the corn, right? So this is something where I could make an impact, but maybe I need to get a different, kind of different place. Because not only do you have to clear out all the weeds, but the robot is really small in a cornfield. So if you look at this, this is just a test field. This is a very small field. But because of the battery on the robot and the size of it needs to be in order to go underneath the corn plants, you can only go down a couple of these rows before the battery dies. And I realized that there was no way that this would be commercially viable. There's no way I would be able to start a company that would be able to function like this. As a research project, really wonderful, very helpful for the professor. And it gave me a good stepping stone to take the next step and search for a better problem to solve within agriculture. And with that, I'll pass the torch again.
Okay, very good, thank you. Bien, en esta parte, Adam lo que nos está comentando es que una vez que inicia con esta cuestión de hacer todas los proyectos con los que inició, él obviamente mejora mucho sus habilidades. Intentó, no se detuvo, y al terminar sus grados, sus estudios, obviamente siguió intentando y nos mostró una lista de investigaciones con las que empezaba como a trabajar. Sin embargo, él siempre supo que él quería tener su propia compañía. Entonces, todas estas, digamos, prácticas, todos estos estudios, estos experimentos que realizó le sirvieron de muchísimo aprendizaje. Destaca mucho esta parte de que si tienes una idea, la intentes, que no dejes de intentar. Si tú intentas, vas a estar aprendiendo, y al final, después de prueba y error, si no dejas de intentar y con tanto aprendizaje adquirido, al final esto te va a llevar a donde tú pretendes alcanzar, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, nos muestra los modelos de sus primeros robots, los iniciales, y comenta que eran pues de bajo costo y que realmente les fue de utilidad más bien para cuestiones de investigación. Con ellos hacía prueba y error y bueno, fueron unos modelos muy útiles, sobre todo en el área de búsqueda y rescate. Esto fue interesante porque al final él lo que quería era demostrar que no tenía miedo a mostrar las ideas, ¿no? Que pudieran resultar a lo mejor muy originales o muy diferentes a lo previo, muy innovadoras, pero recomienda eso, ¿no? Que un tip muy grande que él puede darnos es que no tengamos miedo de mostrar las ideas sin importar lo que los demás piensen, porque al final nosotros somos los que estaríamos innovando. Tan es así que estos pequeños robots de búsqueda y rescate que él diseñó, le llamó la atención por la cuestión como militar al departamento de policía, por los posibles usos que se les pudiera dar, ya que el departamento de policía pues estaba interesado en hacer rescates, pero sin arriesgar a las personas, ¿no? Entonces, pues, que con esto comenzó trabajando con el departamento de policía, ofrecían sus robots, pagaban por ellos. Sin embargo, él quería hacer un cambio en el mundo, ¿no? Él quería trascender un poco más, dejar un legado un poco mayor. Porque, bueno, estos robots hasta este punto eran fáciles de vender. Sin embargo, no era algo muy sustentable a largo plazo. Por lo tanto, pues regresó a hablar con sus profesores y se dio cuenta que ellos estaban trabajando en el rubro de la agricultura. Y al estar en prácticas con ellos, en sus pláticas, llegaron a una conclusión y a él le llamó la atención un dato que nos brinda, que decía que en ese momento se perdía aproximadamente un promedio del 25% del maíz. Era una pérdida en Estados Unidos debido a las condiciones de que el maíz, el viento era muy ligero, entonces se salía volando, pues. Entonces esto, bueno, era una gran pérdida, ¿no? De una de las mayores cosechas del país. Entonces, bueno, sus profesores le recomendaban que tuviera dos visiones, ¿no? Que tuviera una mente abierta y que llegaron a una conclusión de que no estuvieran tan atados, tan ligados a las viejas ideas, ¿no? Esa era parte de la cuestión de innovación. Entonces, bueno, lo primero con lo que iniciaron era con la idea de remover primero toda la maleza, todas las raíces débiles, para sembrar un poco de maíz, pero de una manera más estable, un tipo de maíz que tuviera como un poco más de fortaleza, de fuerza en sus raíces. Él quería lograr un impacto mucho más grande para el medio ambiente y para la gente. Esto fue un buen inicio para él, pero él quería trascender un poco más, ¿no? Lograr un impacto mayor, tanto en el medio ambiente como en la gente que trabaja en el campo. Bueno, en general, entonces se percataron que realmente, como pudimos apreciar en la imagen, los campos de maíz, de siembra, de cosecha, pues son muy grandes y realmente su robot en cierto punto se dieron cuenta que era muy pequeño, ¿no? Para los terrenos. Aparte tenía por ahí detalles que había que trabajar más, ¿no? Para hacerlo viable, como por ejemplo la cuestión de la batería, ¿no? Entonces esto pues en algún punto ya no lo volvió tan comercial, dejó de ser tan comercial y entonces su profesor le sugirió que se fueran a un problema un poco mejor, un poco mayor en el área de agricultura.
Okay. So now I guess the cool technology part, it didn't come right away. You know, I was working on all these things and the road is pretty bumpy, as you just saw. I took lots of different directions. And every time I changed directions was because I did something like this. I took this picture and I knew that the United States has a Department of Agriculture. And I figured they probably were doing a lot of interesting work there. And if I sent them this picture and a little description of what I was currently doing, maybe there would be some scientists that weren't working with corn, but were working with another type of crop. And maybe they had some research they were doing that I could use the robot and I could use my expertise, because I wasn't a scientist. I wasn't studying the plants. You know, I fell into agriculture. I didn't even know I would be there. So I needed people to add to my team, essentially. And I needed a technology that could make a difference in the world that wasn't with corn, because that was a very difficult place to be. So when I sent this, I got a response back from these two researchers. These scientists had been working with fruit it's a fruit research station that the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, they have a agricultural research service, which is full of scientists. I didn't even know about this, but the word of my project got to them. And after working with strawberries for 35 years, they had spent the past 10 years working on a new type of treatment, and they called that treatment Phylolux. And before they even met me, I will share now that the next few slides are slides that they had before me, so it shows how they approached this problem and why they approached it. And then you'll see that it was just a perfect fit at the end. So I'm taking the white slides that are coming up from this wonderful scientist here, Fumi Takada. So this was his reasoning. He said, well, there's a limited number of pesticides available, and really they don't work very well. There's a lot of resistances that build up to these chemicals. So it's pretty bad, and there's restrictions. So the farmers can't even use the same chemicals from year to year because of these new restrictions that come up. And that's because chemicals are dangerous. They hurt the environment, they're bad for human health. So new regulations come up, and some of the chemicals that farmers rely on have to change from year to year. So it's really a difficult position for the farmers. And more than that, or not more than that, but just an additional thing is that the consumers even want non-chemical fruit. They don't want the chemicals either. So now you've got farmers who can benefit from a non-chemical solution, and they won't be doing as much damage to the environment. And the consumers want that anyway. So why don't we, he thought with his group of scientists, so why don't we look at what's available and see if there's anything that we can do differently. And they realized that there's actually a naturally occurring form of light. It comes from the sun. Now this UVC spectrum, which is an ultraviolet light, it's actually blocked by our atmosphere. And because it's blocked by our atmosphere, the living things on Earth have not adapted to it. So we don't actually get exposed to it at all. But there's artificial ways of creating it. So you can have a light bulb that creates this type of light. And what's interesting is it disrupts this connection between these thymines in the DNA. And now for more advanced organisms, like our skin, for example, the very top layers of skin is enough to block the UVC light, and it doesn't go straight to our DNA. However, the microorganisms, the ones that the farmers are using the chemicals to kill, the things that create mold in the field and other types of fungi, some of these little pests that eat the strawberries, these things don't have this as much of a protective layer. So you can, if you shine enough energy down, you can actually create this disruption. And for these microorganisms, they don't have a long life. And although it doesn't kill them necessarily, what it does is it prevents them from reproducing. So now they can't reproduce and they can't grow on the plants anymore. So they die off. Instead of using the chemicals, we can use this form of light to prevent them from becoming a problem in the field. So when they dug a little deeper, they saw that people have been trying to do this. They had shown that they can get results, but the problem is UVC, if you do it for too long, you start to see a discoloration on the plants, on the surface of the plant. Because if you leave it for a very long time, you can start to penetrate into the tissue of the plant. And this picture, I guess, doesn't show it too well, but there's a little darkening here. And what you end up getting is a reduction in yield. So although you can replace the chemicals, now you're reducing the yield. So you're kind of losing the benefit that you would have had. So they set out 10 years ago. It took them 10 years to figure this out, but they set out back then to try to find ways of using this light in a way that could address the problems like gray mold, mildew, these two-spotted spider mites, these things that reduce the yield significantly. Gray mold alone, you could lose 80% of your crop if you don't spray for it. So it's a really big impact for the farmers. So they set out to try to figure out how to use this light. And one of the really innovative things they did, I'd say by happen chance, but they realized that some of these pathogens, these microorganisms, they have a repair mechanism. So if you do a UVC treatment during the day, they can actually self-repair their DNA, and then it won't effectively treat. So they ask the question, what happens if you just take the light away? Well, if you take the light away, they found that you could use much less intense light from the UVC. You can get rid of the microorganisms that are causing the yield reduction, and it won't damage the strawberry plant. And they did a lot of experiments. Once they discovered that this was possible, they did a lot of experiments, specifically on strawberries, because remember, they were a fruit research station. But you can see some of the results. So when you have the mold, if you take the strawberries and you put the mold on there, you kind of you put the mold there so that you can know it's there, and then you treat against it, and you don't treat, you can see the mold grows quite a lot on the strawberries. And then the ones that get the treatment, you can see these are healthy berries that you could be sent to market. Now, of course, they didn't start this way. They started in Petri dishes. So you can see some of the results here. If you put a little bit of these pathogens into a Petri dish and you do these treatments, you can see how the dark actually improved quite a bit upon the results that they were getting. And they did that for a few other things. So spider mites, gray mold, spider mites, and powdery mildew are the three biggest yield reducers for strawberries. So they kind of focus on this area. And these are kind of what spider mites look like. They're extremely hard to see. They're very, very small. So maybe they're not a microorganism, but they're extremely small. So when they did this, you can count them underneath a magnifying lens. You can count them on the leaves, and they saw that the untreated leaves had many, many more than the treated leaves. So this was very promising. You know, they're still doing it in the lab, and this is what you can see on the plants. You can see here there's some webbing along the plant. So it was so effective that it was visible. So they can see by eye that it was having a good impact. And they did the same thing for these bugs, and these are a little bit larger now. And they weren't killing the bugs. The bugs just didn't want to be there. If they were shining the light, the bugs would just leave. And by having the bugs leave the plant, they showed that they also were able to control quite significantly against having the plants disrupt the strawberry yield. Now, ultimately, what they found was that the UVC technology had no effect on the plant's photosynthesis, on its pollen viability, and it didn't change the fruit. So everything was perfectly the same except for the yield, because if you didn't treat the plants, then the yield would be much lower. So now you could have equal yield as with the pesticides, but by replacing it with this UVC and dark combination. One thing that they didn't necessarily expect was this increased disease resistance. And they did some experiments where they showed that if you treat a plant with the UVC, it actually becomes more resistant to getting the gray mold and powdery mildew again. And this is interesting, but it's also kind of research still, because you don't always, when you see a result, you don't necessarily know right away why it happens. And they're continuing to study things like this. And also, another research group, seeing some of the promising results from UVC, showed that you can increase shelf life using UVC. So now we're talking about not just treating in the field, get rid of the chemicals, but we're talking about an even bigger impact, because strawberries are a fresh fruit. So when you ship them, you have to basically pick and ship right away. And if you can increase shelf life, imagine how much less waste we would have in the market. There's an unbelievable amount of strawberries thrown in the garbage because they don't have good shelf life. You know, if we can increase that, then, you know, we could really increase the market by having, you know, a grower in California could ship further away. They can spend longer time in transit. And also you would just be, in general, throwing a lot less away, you know. So there's a lot of interesting things that we could do here. But from the scientists, they were doing all this in the lab. So strawberries aren't grown in the lab, they're grown on farms. And they realized that in order to make this viable, they had to develop collaborations with people who could get this technology to the growers. And if we were able to do that, they had a lot of other ideas too. You know, it wouldn't just be for UVC, but there's a lot of things that are a pain, right? Just like picking up tennis balls was a pain for a farmer, there's lots of things that are difficult to do and expensive to do. And a lot of manual labor goes into these things that it's backbreaking work. It's not good work for humans to be stuck doing. And the farmers have to deal with all of this. So it's even improve some of the other ways the farm is run if we're able to automate something and put this UVC robot in the field. So these are some of the ideas that they had that they were curious about, but maybe not able to expand on yet. So when they finished their, or when I met them, these were kind of the conclusions they had from the research. They saw something that worked, and it was something that would be great to get to the farmers, but there was one really big thing they couldn't do. They couldn't get this out to the farmers, really. You know, it's a treatment that has to happen at night. And farmers don't want to be out there in the middle of the night working extra hours, paying extra money to do these treatments. It wasn't feasible. It's just not, it's not a logical thing to do. And anyway, you know, if you put your hand underneath the UVC light, you're going to get a really bad sunburn. So you don't really want humans to be out there pulling the lights and being exposed to it. So they realized that there's this drawback of their research, despite all of these benefits. And that's when they received my picture and my little report that said, hey, I'm somebody who's working on robots in agriculture, and I'm looking for another problem to solve. And it was like, it was meant to be, you know? And I think this is a good message for people who have their own ideas, because I tried a lot of things. This is just where I ended up. This is, you could say it's luck, you know, but at some point you make your own luck, because I was trying so many things that eventually I ran into the right person to do something that was going to have a big impact. And with these scientists, we got together and said, what if we just make, I don't know if you guys know what a Roomba is, but there's a company, iRobot, one of the most heavily commercialized robots on Earth is a robot vacuum cleaner. And it sits on the side of in the side of your room, and it automatically deploys itself. It comes out and vacuums the floor and goes back. So we thought, well, if you can do it for carpets, then why can't we just have a robot carry lights, and instead of cleaning carpets, you're cleaning the pathogens in the field. So it can charge itself up during the day, and it can just carry lights. And for me as a roboticist, this sounded too good to be true, because a lot of the other robotics companies, they're trying to do really difficult things, like pick strawberries. Sure, that's a really big problem in terms of cost for the farmer, but it's also a really hard problem to solve. And sometimes there's problems that are kind of less sexy to solve, but much more impactful because you can actually do them, you know? And so for me, this was the perfect thing. And I knew that I had to pivot the company in this direction. All right, so the next thing I'll talk about is how we actually did that. But first, let's get a good translation.
Okay, very good. Yeah, right. Lots of information here. Bien, pues ahora vamos a la parte un poco, empezando un poco la parte más técnica. Aquí es donde entra la parte de la tecnología. Él inicia esta sección con una imagen, una fotografía de él mismo con el proyecto, con el trabajo de un robot en el campo. Pero él se percata de una situación, ¿no? Realmente él trabaja en el área de tecnología, él domina el área de la robótica, pero pues necesita conocimientos científicos de agricultura, ¿no? Entonces él decidió dar difusión a esa imagen, dar difusión a esa fotografía para mostrar el trabajo que se estaba llevando a cabo ante otros agricultores, ante otros científicos, para sumar esfuerzos, para trabajar juntos, para compartir conocimientos, ¿no? Entonces, él era la parte tecnológica, pero necesitaba de la parte de la ciencia. Y entonces recibió respuesta de parte del Departamento de Agricultura de Estados Unidos, un par de doctores que él menciona, no sé si vaya a ser correcta la pronunciación, el doctor Worksich y el doctor Takeda, que trabajaban con fresas. Siendo así, los doctores con los que empezó Adam a colaborar le comentaban algunas de las áreas de oportunidad en el campo de la siembra de cosecha de fresas, ¿no? Uno de ellos destacaba el número limitado de pesticidas, que también mencionaban que los granjeros estaban en situaciones muy limitadas en cuanto a esta cuestión de pesticidas, que también se daban cuenta que habían pesticidas que hacían mucho daño de forma química en las cosechas, y que también, por otro lado, hablando comercialmente, la gente también quería pesticidas amigables, ¿no? Con el ambiente. Entonces él se dio cuenta que allí había un área de oportunidad en donde podría generar ese impacto que tanto buscaba, que podía ayudar tanto a los granjeros como a la gente que consume estos pesticidas. Entonces empieza una explicación algo técnica acerca de los daños que se estaban causando en las fresas. Hace una explicación acerca de cómo la luz solar irradia estos rayos UV, y nos habla de ciertos microorganismos que se encuentran en las plantas, en las hojas de la fresa, y cómo tienen una pequeña capa, pero que estos microorganismos no tenían esta capa para proteger del daño de los rayos UV. Entonces, estos rayos podían penetrar en el tejido de la planta y dañarla, ¿no? Entonces, esto generaba un gran impacto para los granjeros, y lo que se pretendía con las investigaciones era, de resumidas cuentas, pretendían hacer que esta luz, estos rayos UV de la luz, fueran efectivos, pero no contra las plantas, sino contra las plagas, ¿no? Entonces, que pudieran de esta manera acabar con los microorganismos que dañaban a las fresas, no a la planta como tal. Entonces se hicieron varios experimentos no puedes tener la luz solar en un laboratorio, pero sí puedes, pues, reproducirla. Entonces pudimos ahí ver algunas muestras en discos de Petri con los comparativos de los resultados de estos experimentos, y se daban cuenta que las plagas, pues si bien no son microorganismos, sí son muy, muy, muy pequeños. Tenían que verlos con lupa. Y con estos efectos de la luz solar, se dieron cuenta que verdaderamente sí estaba dando algún resultado, puesto que estos microorganismos, bueno, no microorganismos, estas pequeñas plagas mínimas, microscópicas, sí, con prueba y error se dieron cuenta que sí resultaba efectivo, que sí estaban siendo eliminados. Entonces, pretendieron que esta investigación continuara con el fin tal de que los resultados fueran los óptimos, ¿no? Porque estaban percatándose que una no afectaba a la fotosíntesis, que todos estos experimentos realmente eran óptimos porque no estaba haciendo ningún impacto en la fotosíntesis de la planta como tal, que no había tampoco efectos en la viabilidad de polinización de las plantas, que no había tampoco cambios en la consistencia de la fruta. Entonces se dieron cuenta que por ahí podían seguir abordando estos experimentos. Sin embargo, bueno, después de tanto intento y tanta experimentación que estaba resultando positiva, también analizaron otra perspectiva, ¿no? Nos dimos cuenta que las fresas son un perecedero, ¿no? Una fruta que realmente se tiene que colectar y hacer envíos de inmediato para mantener la frescura de la fruta. Entonces, pues habían muchas cosas que se estaban desarrollando y para bien de los experimentos con resultados excelentes, pero al final del día las fresas pues no crecen en laboratorios, ¿no? Nos comentaban que realmente las fresas crecen en el campo. Entonces, pues para fines de investigación y para fines prácticos, pues los resultados eran excelentes, pero ahora el desafío era llevarlo al campo y hacerlo de forma efectiva, puesto que para los granjeros hasta este momento habían muchas cosas que presentaban muchas dificultades y sobre todo gastos, ¿no? Que eran cuestiones muy caras, por lo que había que mejorar los procesos y que al final también estos experimentos pudieran expandirse a otro tipo de cosechas. Es decir, que todo lo que se estaba llevando a cabo en el laboratorio realmente fuera efectivo en el campo, ¿no? En la cuestión práctica. Y entonces, bueno, básicamente de las conclusiones que menciona Adam, a las cuales llegaron en este laboratorio, en estos experimentos, destaca uno muy importante, que era lo que subrayaba: los avances tecnológicos al final recaían en las manos de los desarrolladores de robots, puesto que toda la ciencia ya estaba desarrollada, pero ahora había que habilitarla en cuestiones de tecnología. Entonces, él pues se sintió muy orgulloso porque dijo, bueno, ahí es donde yo puedo entrar, ¿no? Ahí es donde yo puedo hacer mi aporte. Y bien, se recordó que existe esta área robótica llamada Roomba, que se trata de unos robots que trabajan la tierra, que trabajan el campo de manera automática para hacerlo, para limpiarlo, pues para prepararlo para las cosechas, para hacer este tipo como de limpieza en automático para preparar la tierra. Y bien destaca que efectivamente existían otros robots, ¿no? Que los robots en la agricultura pues quizás no eran como una novedad como tal, pero la novedad, la innovación en la que ellos iban a aportar era esta experimentación, ¿no? Es decir, si bien habían robots que se enfocaban en recolectar las fresas, esto no solucionaba ningún problema, sino que los robots que Adam empezó a desarrollar con los laboratorios y con las experimentaciones se enfocaban no a tareas mecánicas, sino a aportar soluciones en el área del medio ambiente, que ese era el propósito de esta investigación.
Okay, so I guess, so how did we actually use that? You know, I heard about this technology. Now I met the researchers, but I had no idea what a strawberry field looked like. So I needed to kind of do a little research and try to understand, is this going to be better or worse than cornfields? You know, maybe the technology was perfect.
Sorry to disturb you. No, sorry to disturb you. Just in order to follow with the questions, I don't know if you could give an answer to these questions that we have into the chat.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. Let's see.
Bien, ahora va a dar respuesta a las preguntas que se encuentran en el chat.
Oops. Let me in the chat.
If you want, I can read those for you.
Oh, yeah, that'd be easier. Yeah.
Okay, yes, very good. So, Juan Moreno is asking, hey there, Adam. My name's Juan Moreno, and I got a question. An advice you can give to someone who wants to start with robots?
Sure.
That would be the first question.
Yeah. I think there's, well, currently there's so many resources available to get started. And I think the hardest part is getting started. And if you think of something that you want to do with the robot and come up with a project, and then look online and definitely look up Arduino and Raspberry Pi, and you can probably find a similar project to the one that you want to do. And what's good about having a project is it'll motivate you to complete it. And it's a lot harder to just look up Arduino or Raspberry Pi and look at a bunch of code. It's not going to become meaningful to you, and you're not going to learn anything unless you have a project to focus on. So, and they're not very expensive. For like under $5, at least US dollars, I know, you can get an Arduino and start working with it. So I'd say get one of these things, think of a project, and then just search online a little bit. You don't need to go to get your PhD in order to do things with automation.
Bien, como respuesta, Adam nos da un consejo para todos aquellos que quieren iniciarse con esta cuestión de la robótica, de los robots. Él brevemente menciona que ya existen algunas buenas investigaciones en línea para iniciar en este rubro, que todo consiste en iniciar haciendo investigaciones en Internet, en la red, sobre todo buscar proyectos. Él recomienda entrar a plataformas como Arduino y Raspberry Pi, en donde destaca que efectivamente lo importante es iniciar, que lo inicial es tener ya pensado un proyecto que pudiera desarrollarse y bueno, que podemos encontrar ahí muchas maneras, muchos recursos, proyectos similares que quizás a lo mejor ya estén en desarrollo y que parte de la robótica sea únicamente complementar, ¿no? Que no necesitas esperar a terminar un grado para iniciar con estos proyectos, que puedes simplemente iniciar con alguna investigación y pues vaya, incluirte en algún proyecto o desarrollar tu propio proyecto con base en algunas investigaciones que ya existan previamente en línea. Okay, so we have another question. It is from Daniel de Jesus. Hey Adam, my name is Daniel de Jesus. How well do you think this type of technology would adapt to low resource farmers around the world, where a great amount of crops are harmed by pests and diseases and harmful pesticides aren't as regulated?
I think the impact would be even greater than it would be in countries that have more regulations. And also, it's really hard for some of the farmers in other countries because maybe they're just a small family trying to support themselves with the farm. And one thing that's really good about automation is once you do it, that technology exists. So if we get the robots and we build them and start using them on farms in the US or in North America in general that are close enough for me to make an impact easily, so I can start there. And then when they work, as we take the robots and kind of decommission them from the farms in North America, we can send them all over the world in these other places, and the code is already there. The program is there, you know, and all you need are the light bulbs, you know, and then the robot can actually be used in these other places, and it'll be nice because I'll be able to do the testing closer to where I live. So I don't send something that doesn't work to them. Maybe we can get something that works well. You can see like a automobile for now, it's a very complicated technology, but now that we know how to do it, these cars can last 30 years without any issues. So we can start to take the technology that we're developing and send it to these other countries where they can use it. You can use it not because they have other chemicals, but because it's actually easier for them. Not because of the regulations or anything, but it's easier. They can farm more land. They can expand their farm instead of saying, I only have 3 or 4 people that can help me on this farm. Now I have this robot that can start helping me not just with the UVC, but maybe we can expand and do other things like weeding, things that are a lot of manual labor that are very difficult for those farmers. So I think there's a really great amount of potential in the future to expand technology to these areas.
Bien, Adam nos comenta que realmente él considera que el impacto de estas tecnologías será mayor incluso en países con regulaciones, porque evidentemente hay muchos países con gente que se dedica al campo, que se dedica a la agricultura, pero hablamos de pequeñas familias, ¿no? Que realmente viven de eso sin mayor producción o mayores recursos. Entonces, básicamente él considera que la automatización ayudará muchísimo en un futuro y que estos experimentos realmente ahorita se están encargando de desarrollarlos para pulirlos a la perfección. Él da un rango, un parámetro aproximado como de un estimado de 30 años en los que estas tecnologías y esta automatización evidentemente generarán un impacto positivo, puesto que lo que buscan es desarrollar tecnologías que faciliten, más allá de los recursos, el factor humano, que en vez de estar trabajando 2, 3, 5, 10 personas, que con estos robots y estos proyectos puedan eficientar los procesos y facilitar pues el trabajo para la gente, por lo que lo considera bastante viable y bastante sí, factible y que cree que va a ser un gran aporte en un futuro no muy largo, un plazo no muy largo. Well, very good. That's all up to now. We got no more questions. So if you may, you may continue if you want to.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for the questions, everyone. So I guess now I had some technology that I thought could be very impactful, but it was only ever done in the lab. So I didn't know if it would work on a strawberry farm, and I didn't even really know what a strawberry farm looked like. So remember, I had only built these smaller robots in cornfields and for police departments so far. So this is a really big change for me, but it was more than worth it because I could see how much impact this could have. And this is, for those of you who don't know, this is what a strawberry field looks like. And you can see it's way more structured than a cornfield. It couldn't be any better than this. They're in these nice rows. There's a nice place for the robot to drive in between them. And what I found was that this crop actually per acre, they make, in the US, they make $25,000 per acre instead of $800 per acre in corn. So it's very profitable per acre, which means the robot doesn't have to have as big of a battery. It doesn't have to cover as much acreage as it would have in the cornfield. So now it's feasible. Now it makes sense for a robot to travel along these really structured rows, and I can charge enough money to support a company. And also, strawberries are just a really nice fruit. So it was a really nice place to work. You know, for me, I was excited to be working with something. I didn't like, corn is a lot harder to work with, I would say. And strawberries are so nice to have a bunch of strawberries to eat when you come home. So this sounded very like a much better plan. But what most consumers like you and me don't know is that there's a big problem with strawberries. And it might have been a coincidence that the United States Department of Agriculture scientists happen to be working on this problem in a fruit research station. But strawberries are actually the #1 on the dirty dozen, meaning there's more pesticides used on them than any other fruit or vegetable. So of all places to be having this solution, it's more important for strawberries than any other crop. And maybe I'm just lucky that it happened to be this way, but when you go to the market, you come home with an average of 22 pesticide residues. That's because of how many chemicals they use, and they need to because these pathogens damage their yield so badly. And to give you an idea of what it looks like, this is a farmer spraying their strawberries with these pesticides. And it's not fun for them either. They hate it. How would you like to be out there wearing this plastic suit with the mask, worrying about how much of it's getting on your skin and how much of it you're breathing in? Farmers don't like doing this. So it's really easy to tell farmers that I could get rid of their chemicals. It's really, really something they're interested in, you know, and it costs them, not only do they have to do this, but it costs them $2,500 per year per acre. So now we're talking about an amount of money that is much more sizable than we would have in the police department and in a place that is much more feasible. And this is per year. So that means they wouldn't pay me one time, but they would pay every year, and they wouldn't be afraid to pay that because they're already doing it. So if I could just replace what they're doing now, they wouldn't have to wear this suit anymore. And it's not just that. There's a whole bunch of other problems associated with spraying pesticides. From a field management standpoint, when they spray these chemicals, they're walking through the field spraying these chemicals, they have to put up a sign that tells other people not to go in there. And it depends on what chemical they spray, but there's a no entry period. So for a farmer that has, for example, a you-pick farm where their customers come pick the berries, they have to put a sign up that says you can't pick berries today. And that's not good for a business. You know, people don't want to know how much chemicals are being used. They have to hire people or get a license to do this sprays. And these are problems for the farmer directly, but there's a lot of problems for the environment as well. And the farmers are conscious of this, and they don't like it, and the consumers hate it. Now, the chemicals that they spray, they go into the waterways, and they affect our ecosystems. Now, all of the animals that are getting affected by these, even if there's regulations that prevent a farm from being too close to a town or from people drinking the water directly away from a farm, there's no regulations for the animals. So they are being affected. And these are you know, known carcinogens, some of these chemicals that are sprayed. So, you know, there's definite improvements. I mean, if we just talk about birds alone, we know in the United States that we lose a lot of birds to this. I mean, they consume the chemicals, and a lot of this wildlife that we have in our environment gets affected very, very poorly by this type of chemicals. So it's really like, from this, there's so many problems with it. You might ask, well, why is there not a non-chemical alternative? Why has no one thought of a better way? And it makes sense, because if you don't use the chemicals, you can't get enough yield to be profitable as a farmer. It's really, really difficult. But if we were to have a non-chemical alternative, there's more benefit than just eliminating all of those problems, because the consumers don't want chemicals either. And in fact, they'll pay more for produce that does not have the chemicals. So now a farmer not only gets rid of all of those problems with spraying, but they can also make more money. And now I'm doing this research. This is before we built any robots or anything. We just heard about the problem, and we were just researching to see if this could be a feasible thing. And I'm looking at all this, and this is just too good to be true, you know, from a company standpoint. I think this is what people should do for any of their ideas, really, because you're going to invest a lot of time into something like this. And you should really take a step back and say, does this make sense? You know, because you can spend your time on, you know, a lot of different things. And for me, this is how I did my research beforehand. And I knew that the treatment itself was pretty simple. It's something I could do with a robot. The Food and Drug Administration, they're already okay. So it's not going to be illegal. They already accept UVC as a way of treating food against different pathogens and different types of things. So I knew that it wouldn't be illegal for me to put this on a robot. It'd be something that I can give to the farmer. And the treatments themselves are pretty simple, just 15 to 60 seconds and twice a week. And of course, it's simple if you're a robot, but it's not very good if you're a person doing these, because 30 hours a week at night would cost a lot of money for the farmer to add to their regular operations. And doing this stuff at night is a lot harder than operating a tractor during the day. So what our plan was is just take this technology and use our robotics knowledge to solve the problems. So everything seems good. The technology seems feasible. It seems like we can make an impact for the farmers. But the next thing we needed to do, and I would suggest anybody should do this, is then you talk to the customers. You say, well, it seems like there's an impact here, but you have to ask the people that you're trying to solve the problem for next. And that's what we did. We reached out to some of the biggest names in the strawberry industry, and we said, you know, would this actually solve problems? And we heard that actually these people knew about it already, because for the past 10 years, they've been hearing one of the leading scientists in strawberry research talk about this work and talk about their attempts to eliminate these chemicals being used on strawberry farms. And people were excited about it, but they weren't as excited as they could be because they didn't see a way of it making it possible. So, well, it's not going to be possible for me to carry or bring these lights around to the field. How are you going to make this something feasible for me? So now we're talking. You know, now we're talking about something that could really make an impact for these farmers, because they wanted it too. It was a problem that we could come up with a solution for, and the farmers actually wanted it. And another thing you should do, at least for a business, maybe it's not so important if you're just talking about initiative. So initiative, you don't necessarily need to be profitable, but for a business, I needed to also look up these numbers. And I found that strawberries, there's a lot of money in strawberries, and especially in the way they spray the pesticides. So this is money that our company could actually use to operate and improve our technology and build a team. And this made a lot more sense to me than some of the other things we had done. And actually, there's a huge opportunity if you look at how pesticides are used in the US alone, just the US. Imagine if we were able to scale this to the world. And to do that, we would want to come up with basically a non-chemical replacement for pesticides and provide it as a service. And a service made sense because I already had made the mistake of selling things. One-time sales don't make a business. So I learned that we should provide it as a service. And for farmers, this worked perfectly. They wanted a service because they wanted something that would be a lower expense year after year because it fit into their business model. So this made a lot of sense. So we had everything lined up. I was ready to go. And we needed one more thing. And it's money. You know, you can't build a robot for free. It's really, and you couldn't really use Arduinos. You know, it's great for hobbies. But if you're going to build a product that needs to be reliable for people, you really need to take this step forward. And the robots that were going to be used in these strawberry fields weren't small robots anymore. They weren't robots like my PhD work that I could break right away and just build another one. So I did this a lot. So this is actually, you know, one of the first things that I did was I presented in front of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. They had a Youth Innovation Challenge. And here I am on stage being super uncomfortable talking about this idea for one of the first times. But I'd say this is really important for anybody who has an idea. It's really important that you put it in front of people. You know, and it doesn't have to be some like super innovative technology. Innovation happens in all types of ways. You know, you can have an idea to start an initiative to clean up plastic water bottles that are in streams and waterways, or just an initiative to maybe help increase regulation on chemical use in other ways. You know, these types of things matter. And for me, I was working on technology and I was putting my idea out there so that I could get some funding. And I think awareness is almost equally important as funding in many different things. Like for me, for robotics, money was important, but in many ideas, you don't even have to look for money. It's more about awareness and having people know about what you're doing. And sometimes I think one trap that people fall into is they think, I can't share what I'm doing because people will steal it. I'll tell you right now, it's really hard to make something work. You need to be persistent. You know, you have to be passionate about what you do. And I think anybody can do it, but you really need to try hard. You know, it's not easy. I won't tell you that it's easy. So, which is great, because that means if you share your ideas to lots of people, they'll get excited about it and they can't steal it very easily. You know, and people won't just take it. They'll get excited and help you more likely. You know, the only reason I'm here today is because I made this presentation, you know? So I think it's important to do that. And it's really important because you can't do it alone. It is really hard. And what I did was I leveraged my resources. I was a student at the University of Delaware, and I started telling everyone at the University of Delaware what we were doing. And I even taught a class. So I taught a class that was focused on using the skills that the students were learning in classes to help me build this robot, essentially. And it was really great because I was able to generate a lot of interest and get a lot of people to join me in doing this and working on this project. And like I said, like I might have a specialty or kind of a superpower of my own. Maybe I like inventing things and building things, but other people are better at coding than me, and other people are better at marketing than me and helping even take pictures. I'm not very good at taking pictures, but some of the students love photography. So it takes a lot of people and a team to make this stuff happen. So, you know, when you have an idea, just make sure you do share it with people. And it's not just about the team of people that make the idea happen, but again, the customers are very important. So once we had this, you can see we're just in a dirt field here. We knew that we needed to eventually get to strawberry fields because that's where our customers were. So then we reached out to the strawberry growers. And we actually, pretty much everyone we reached out to said, that sounds great. I would love you to try it on my farm. And we knew that it wasn't possible to try it everywhere. So we picked one. And we ended up deciding that Pfeiffer Orchard, which is the largest strawberry farm in Delaware, was the best place to be because a lot of other growers looked to them. They're an innovator. They use different techniques, and they're willing to do something like this, and other farms could then see the technology. It made it really easy for us because then other farmers would know what we're doing without us having to personally tell them. We could have the Pfeiffer family, share this new technology with other growers. And because we were doing that, we would build trust. It's much better than working just on a research field, you know? So just like if you have an idea, you can work in isolation. You can even build a team and work on it yourself, or you can get out there and try to share it with as many people as possible and give it to the customer. It's not going to work right away. I'd say this robot definitely did not work the first time. It even ran over some strawberries a few times. And the farmers thought that solving the problem was important enough that if we sacrificed a couple of strawberry plants, that was okay. And probably you'll find the same thing if you have an idea. So the good news is we were able to, in summer last year, get that first prototype. You can see even this prototype is different than the last one I just showed because it wasn't so great to start. But we were able to learn quickly and fail a lot. And we were able to get this robot running in this strawberry field setup. And this was great because we had, my impacts were even more broadly than I expected. You know, I was even helping students learn about robotics, and they were getting a lot of value putting the skills that they were learning in school to solve a real problem. So we built the robot. It wasn't perfect, but we knew we needed something that could move autonomously through the strawberry fields. But we had another problem. We found that the arrays that were available, the UVC arrays, were very expensive. So we ended up, in the fall, I taught another class, and I had the students focus on the UVC technology. And we learned how to do this ourselves. So we decided we would build these arrays ourselves because they weren't made to cover so much area. They were made to cover small areas, maybe with a handheld device or just in a fume hood for chemists and stuff like that. So we were able to learn with no prior knowledge, really. We were able to use the internet, which is such a great resource these days, to learn about the technology and build these arrays for just a fraction of the cost that we would have had to pay if we had bought off-the-shelf units. And from there, we had now a robot and the UVC technology. We needed fields. And we, again, used what we had, you know, our resources. We had already made friends with the Pfeiffers, and they agreed to integrate a field into their existing strawberry field, taking the risk that if this didn't work, it could create pathogens and reduce their yield on their regular field. You know, so they were willing to do that, which was really good and really motivating. And then we knew that the researchers at the USDA were very excited. The United States Department of Agriculture, the people who invented this UVC, the science behind it, they were excited. So we asked them to plant a field. And I was a student at UD. And I said, if I buy all the strawberry plants, will you do all the other work? And you can do some research if I can do my research too. And through that synergistic approach, we were able to get a field at the University of Delaware too. So we had everything we needed, but our platform was pretty terrible. So, you know, at least one of these guys is smiling. So, you know, it did not work in real conditions. You know, it worked in perfect dry conditions. And because of that, we kind of luckily had all winter to solve this problem. We then rebuilt this platform. We found more funding, taking the results that we had already. We were able to get some more money and build this platform. And this is the one that we used during our pilot test. You can see it's much more, it looks much more like a tractor than the previous one. We learned a lot because the first time we basically just put a bunch of parts together. We had never built anything like this. And now after building it one time, okay, it cost money and it was kind of, I guess, a failure because it was getting stuck in the mud. But we learned a lot. And because we learned a lot, we were able to build something like this. We also talked to a lot of farmers. They were, as an engineer, I thought certain things would be great. And when I talked to the farmers, they said, do not do that. Don't do it that way. Do it like this. And I learned from them. And that's how we were able to come up with something that could sit outside all year and do these treatments. And this is, I know it's normally done during the day, but I took this little shot so that you can see kind of how it was moving and how this, this robot is kind of carrying these lights. It doesn't have to do anything to the strawberry plants. It literally just has to carry the lights and drive up and down the rows. So like I said before, that seemed like a perfect thing for a roboticist because it wasn't so hard compared to picking strawberries or something like that. So we were able to achieve that. And you can actually see, I took a video at night as well. This is what it looks like at night. This is sped up. It's actually quite slow because remember, it's 15 to 60 seconds of the treatments. So you can imagine being a farmer and being out there moving this slow with your tractor, going through acres and acres of field. It would be terrible, right? So now the robot, and this is moving by itself. So we aren't controlling it. We just told it to treat this field and it just, we have to turn the lights on. So there's still some work to do, but mostly you push a button on the robot and it drives up and down the road and then comes back to the base. So there are things to do still, but before I get to them, I guess I'll let the, I'll pass the torch again to the translation.
Wow, it's amazing, good job. Well, very good. So I get a couple of questions first.
Okay.
Well, they say that we have many engineering students from different careers. So could you share at the end of the presentation some of the engineering drawings that you developed, please? Can it be from the sketch? Of course, if it is possible, do your copyright things.
I think if you email me separately, it'll be easier because I can pull up some things and maybe if you specify like which things you're interested in. But I would say it is one thing that does make it hard for other people to do the same thing is all of what we learned and, you know, some little tricks that we did in the design. If I was to share them now before we're making a lot of revenue and stuff, it would maybe give us a little bit of trouble.
Okay. Bien, nos comenta que con mucho gusto puede compartir algunos de sus bosquejos y algunos de sus diseños en alguna ocasión solicitándolo por por mail, pero comenta que realmente lo interesante de estos diseños es el aprendizaje como tal, no tanto la cuestión del diseño, sino el llevarlo más bien los modelos a la práctica. Okay, another question. Talking about the 22 chemicals you detect in the strawberry fields, do you have any idea of the impacts that this have on the natural environment and on ourselves?
Yeah, so what's nice is I'm not the scientist here, and the scientists thought of that. So they have done studies on the fruit and found that it doesn't have any nutritional impact on the fruit from the strawberry plants. And there's actually some benefits, because if you're spraying pesticides, you've got all your pollinators out there on the plants, but at night they're not as active. So first of all, it won't kill these insects and the things like pollinators and birds. It won't kill them, but they don't like being underneath the light, so they'll just move away. So actually it has much less impact on the wildlife in the field than the pesticide sprays would have. So I think overall, we're definitely conscious that it could have some impacts that we did not foresee in the research, and we're studying those. But so far, it seems that the impacts are only positive, considering we're eliminating the pathogens that would normally be eliminated by the chemicals.
Bien, bueno, nos comenta que evidentemente él no es el científico, no tiene como los datos científicos en cuanto a consecuencias en impacto de los químicos encontrados, pero que sí puede hablar de todo el impacto positivo de la alternativa a las cuestiones químicas, a los pesticidas químicos, puesto que los experimentos demostraron que realmente ni siquiera eran dañinos para las plantas, para las plagas, que lo que sucede es que con la luz que se irradia en estos experimentos, las plagas se sienten incómodas y se van de las plantas. Entonces, la plaga como tal no es que la mate, que sea algo violento contra la plaga, sino que simplemente la erradica de la planta, lo que hace pues benéfico el resultado tanto para la fruta como para el consumidor, ya que no hay ninguna reacción, no hay ningún químico agregado, no hay absolutamente ninguna reacción nociva para la salud al consumidor. Okay, now I got another question. Let me please read it. Para iniciar con tu proyecto, iniciaste con un anteproyecto o una problemática que lograste percibir. Okay. So the question is, in the minute when you started with your project, did you start with a previous project or with another kind of problematical situation that you perceived first at the beginning of your project?
I guess there's lots of problems that I found in the beginning. Well, I mean, first of all, we tried lots of things in the beginning. Before we did anything with UVC or with strawberries, there were lots of other things that we tried, and I learned that I felt that they wouldn't create the impact that I wanted. And I didn't know that this project would until I started learning about the strawberry industry. I went to strawberry fields, I worked with the growers, and I found out that this was really an innovation that can change the way that we farm. And I say that because it's not just strawberries. These pathogens affect other fruit and vegetables too. So as long as we start the company strong in the strawberry industry, we can continue and really make a huge impact. But yeah, we ran into lots of problems. I mean, I definitely, we tried an entirely different way of navigating initially. So we spent months trying to do the navigation differently, and it didn't work. I thought it would work. It would have been great if it did. And we had to completely pivot, and we were pressured because we committed to these trials and the robot didn't work yet. So we had lots of pressure to make it work on time. And it was kind of good to have that deadline and have the stress. The whole team felt the pressure, you know? So I think the problems are good. Failures are good and problems are good.
Bien, bueno, nos comenta que efectivamente al iniciar el proyecto, él ni siquiera contemplaba qué tipo de problemáticas podía percibir, que fueron sobre la marcha ya al dar inicio, al arrancar con él, y que hubieron varias problemáticas que definitivamente ni siquiera se las podía imaginar, que una de ellas fue, por ejemplo, el tiempo pues, que invirtieron en la cuestión de desarrollarlo de la navegación, las cuestiones de navegación, que realmente a la hora de iniciarla se dieron cuenta que estaban equivocadas, que era fallida y aparte tenían la presión del tiempo encima porque al final tenían una fecha de entrega, unos plazos que cumplir, que eso también los motivaba, que eso también era bueno pues para presionarse en el trabajo, ¿no? Pero que sí hubieron como varias problemáticas, sin embargo, piensa que todos los proyectos inician igual y que los problemas son buenos, porque al final él nunca, ni siquiera se imaginaba que esto podría iniciarse así, que él tuvo que investigar, tuvo que aprender muchísimo acerca de las fresas, de agricultura, que pues no es prácticamente como su área, y entonces que esos son los tipos de problemáticas a los que él se enfrentó en un principio, pero considera que todos los problemas, las problemáticas ante los proyectos son buenas porque son desafíos a resolver, ¿no? Okay, another question we had here. Hello, it is a very interesting project. Awesome job. My question is about how you make the navigation problem. How the robot move in the right path on the farm. Did you use vision or some other sensors?
Yeah, so I'd say one of the primary sensors we're using, or initially that we used, well, we tried something totally different. We tried using vision, and we had like a laser, and there's something called a time of flight sensor. We tried a lot of different sensors actually initially. And the reason was we wanted to not use GPS. And then we ended up using GPS, which I didn't want to do initially. And that really helped. So we kind of combined several sensors, and now we have GPS incorporated in there too. But the combination of sensors is pretty useful because, for example, you don't want your robot to like run over something that's in the row. And if you just have GPS, then you can't stop. You won't know that you've hit something necessarily, or you won't know in time. So having a sensor in the front to see something like that. And I think also it's not just the sensors that are important. It's the way that you use the sensor data. Because there's really, GPS gives you position, for example, but it's how you use that in the software. And I think that's a lot of where we have innovation that's hard to copy. So if I was to give you like all of our software and build a robot for you and stuff like that, then it would be hard for me to have a company if I was giving that type of thing away. Because that's a lot of what we learned. You know, as we were out there, we spent a lot of hours in the field trying different ways of making the robot work reliably and using different tricks in the software to use the data and get more out of the data that we were collecting and using from the sensors than you would have if you just took the raw position data. So I think it's, I guess, a combination of several sensors, GPS, and then we are using vision, but in a different way. So we're using it more for data collection than tracking because it happens at night. So yeah, and there's a lot of things we want to do in the future too. So we're very excited about these things too.
Bien, bueno, la respuesta a esta pregunta habla de la importancia no tanto de los sensores, sino de la mezcla de los sensores, porque hubieron una amplia variedad una gama distinta, ¿no? Muchos sensores de muchos tipos, pero también se tuvo que adecuar con la tecnología GPS, que al principio no quería utilizar el GPS, pero se dio cuenta que era la combinación de ambos, un poco de láser, de sensores y del GPS, podía trabajar mucho mejor con los datos, que la importancia de los sensores como tal radica en el manejo de datos que aportan estos sensores y que él considera muy importante para poder desarrollar este proyecto, tanto la combinación de los sensores con el GPS, que realmente lo que nos da es una ubicación, y que los sensores hacen un poco más exacta esta ubicación que se limitaría únicamente si fuera con el uso de GPS, sino que más bien los datos que arrojan, el software que se manejó, el software que se desarrolló a través de estos sensores, es como la parte más trascendente para dar movilidad al proyecto. Okay, I think that there are no more questions up to now. So if you want, we may continue, please.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Thanks.
So I guess the last bit is quite short. It's just kind of telling what we want to do in the future and kind of where we're going with this. And I guess this picture sums up what we want to do, and it aligns well with what the researchers were thinking. You know, we do take feedback from people and try to learn from everyone that we communicate this project to, because they have ideas, especially the farmers. They have ideas where this could be useful. I mean, the fact is they don't have something that can do this. They don't have anything that can go up and down the rows by itself right now on their farm. So part of the trick to making automation work for farmers is just getting them the platform. And that's what we're trying to do. We've been working with a lot of farmers already. And now we're expanding our trials to hopefully get paid pilots. So we'll show that it works for a couple months in farms, especially in California. So we've got a couple pilots going in California starting next year. And it'll be really important that we can start capturing revenue from them. So that's really critical with the UVC technology. But we're also working on other things that this robot can do. So the weeding, we use a camera. Like I said before, we do use some other sensors. So we are able to use a camera and detect and track weeds. We haven't figured out what we want to do with them yet, because we'd like to stay non-chemical. But at least right now we could reduce chemical by just spraying the weeds instead of spraying the entire row middle. One of the most exciting things, in my opinion, that we're doing is we're working with the data that we can collect from the robot. And this isn't for navigation. It helps with navigation if you're really clever, but we haven't implemented on the current platform some of these things. So what we're trying to do now is just predict yield. This is a huge factor for the farmers and for the shipping companies, because strawberries especially, they're a fresh produce. So what we're able to do so far by taking pictures while it's doing treatments, we're able to identify individual strawberry plants and then track how they develop. So we can see, you know, a small strawberry plant grow into a large strawberry plant. We can see the flowers start popping up, and we can see the strawberries start to pop up. So, and we can identify them using machine learning. So I have a kind of a sub team of students who are basically just working with the data, and they're trying to do this independently of what we're doing with the UVC work. So I think this is there's a lot of potential here to really change the way farmers manage their land. You can imagine a farmer just has to sit at home and tell the robot to do things, and he gets a nice picture of his field instead of having to go out there and manage so much. Maybe he can manage more land, or he or she can manage more land by having help from these robots, especially because they can collect the data. So they can really see if there's a disease. Hopefully we can eventually see if there's diseases forming, and maybe even increase UVC in those areas to treat them more effectively. So really a lot of exciting stuff to do once you have a platform in the hands of a farmer. And I think that's like the biggest step for us. So we're excited to get some of these things done. And hopefully, I mean, if you guys have ideas of different things that we can do, we're super interested to hear what other people think. So please definitely share your thoughts with me. I guess in this last slide, you can see my email down here, and here's the website, our company's website, trickrobotics.com. So you can definitely keep in touch with us and see our progress this way. But yeah, I think that's mostly what I have here. So if there are any other questions, I'm happy to share more information with you guys.
Bien, ahora la última parte de esta conversación básicamente fue el futuro, ¿no? A lo que aspiran o en dónde se encuentran en este punto y con qué visión lo están planteando. Entonces Adam comenta que pues todavía hay muchas cosas por hacer. Los granjeros tienen muchas ideas, ¿no? Todo el campo, todo el sector agropecuario tiene ideas para hacer que la automatización funcione, que es con lo que esas ideas a él le aportan, ¿no? Nuevos proyectos, por lo que ahora se están expandiendo todas las pruebas que realiza su compañía, se están expandiendo. Al momento todavía no miden los alcances que pudieran llegar a tener, pero saben el potencial que tiene. Por ahora están trabajando con esta cuestión de evitar químicos y dar alternativas. Sin embargo, lo que él destaca por sobre todas las cosas es el trabajar con los datos que genera toda esta información en la plataforma de navegación. Y porque esto es lo que arroja los factores para identificar qué puntos de desarrollo pueden darse en futuros proyectos y destaca que pues ahí es donde hay mucho potencial, ¿no? En la forma en la que los granjeros, toda la gente encargada del campo maneje las cosechas. La recolecta de los datos es importante para la efectividad. Entonces, el poner al alcance estas plataformas a manos de los agricultores, pues básicamente es como un avance que la tecnología ha aportado y que tiene mucho potencial. Y bien, Adam concluye con la apertura a todos sus planes, ¿no? Si hay gente que tiene ideas, que quiere aportar algún proyecto, gente interesada, comparte en la pantalla sus datos. Ahí alguien está pidiendo, there's somebody asking for your email, which you are right now sharing at the slide. Estamos compartiendo en este momento en la pantalla el correo y los datos de contacto porque Adam está muy interesado en escuchar ideas y propuestas y proyectos que como destacó en toda su plática, él recomienda que busquen gente para desarrollar proyectos, que realmente lo importante de innovar es eso, es dar a conocer las ideas. Mencionó en alguna parte de su conversación que mucha gente se limita a no compartir ideas por miedo a que sean robadas y que realmente no es tan sencillo, que no funciona así, puesto que no es tan fácil llevar a cabo el desarrollo de los proyectos. Entonces, que realmente en su caso lo que sucedió al compartir su información, al compartir sus ideas, fue que hubo mucha gente interesada y mucha gente apoyándolo, porque realmente un proyecto no lo puedes desarrollar solo, necesitas muchísima gente, como por ejemplo mencionaba la parte en la que su proyecto lo llevó a las aulas en Delaware, en la Universidad de Delaware, como una clase, y que ahí obtuvo apoyo por parte de los mismos estudiantes como una congregación de conocimiento, que unos aportaban sus habilidades de marketing, otros aportaban sus habilidades en códigos, otros aportaban sus habilidades en distintas áreas, y que todo esto es lo que genera el progreso en el área de tecnología. Entonces, bueno, como conclusión, Adam cierra con esa apertura, ¿no? Que estén en contacto, que se mantengan informados y que realmente compartan los proyectos, y que él está abierto a escuchar todas las ideas, que no tengamos miedo a compartir ideas innovadoras.
Oh, I should say before ending, I think the message really isn't about the technology or anything that I'm working on. It's really that this is just something that I was interested in. And remember, I was excited to build stuff, and I got into robotics because I got excited about that too. But robotics might not be what you're excited about, and it doesn't need to be a robot to help improve the future. And I think it's really important that people they try to make their ideas a reality, and share your ideas with people, and get people excited about it. And I think one thing that unfortunately people don't think about enough is how their technology impacts the world, and especially the environment, and how sustainable is your innovation. You don't want to do something that's a very short-term solution. While you're thinking of these ideas, think about how it impacts the world, and think about how you can make an improvement on the future. I think that's really critical. And really anyone can do it. You don't have to be a very some special person that is not a real person. You know, anybody can be doing really important things for the future. So yeah, this was just an example of something like that.
Bien, Adam enfatiza esta parte, que realmente no tengan miedo de compartir las ideas y que comencemos destacando el origen de todo, ¿no? Que recordemos que él inició por su gusto y su placer de desarrollar cosas, de construir cosas, de siempre estar creando cosas, pero que realmente más allá de la tecnología, lo importante de la innovación es pensar en el futuro, en generar un impacto a largo plazo, que la tecnología no está únicamente para plantear soluciones inmediatas, sino que al generar un proyecto tengamos una visión a futuro y que genere realmente un impacto para la posteridad, que compartamos las ideas con la gente, que creamos que pueda emocionarse también con estos proyectos y básicamente eso, ¿no? Que tengamos pasión en los proyectos que desarrollemos, que nunca perdamos el enfoque de realmente qué es lo que queremos lograr y que luchemos por esas ideas, que realmente no pensemos que se necesita tener un superpoder o ser alguien muy único o muy especial, que todos podemos aportar algo y que esa es parte de la innovación que genera un impacto mucho más allá de la tecnología. I got a question here. So, can you tell us about your experience in Mexico City last year? Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. I didn't really know what to expect, I would say. The CEC, that whole event, it was kind of like all of a sudden I did it. You know, we saw it and we pretty much say yes to everything, and that's a lot of how you are successful with things. But I was going to a country I had never been to before, and I didn't know much about the event really. And it ended up just being a wonderful experience. We still stay in touch. The teams that were there, we still stay in touch there. And I got to see Mexico City because some of the people that were nationals there were able to show us around, and that experience wouldn't have been possible without being brought together with people from with different cultures. So, and it's really cool staying in touch with everybody, you know, being able to hear about their progress and kind of bounce ideas off of each other. You know, it's something that led to a much longer term relationships. So yeah, I think anyone who has an idea that is, you know, relevant to this area and can present that idea to the Youth Innovation Challenge, it's such a good idea. It's such a good opportunity. And I think they rotate too. So you're not always in one of the countries. So you can even, you know, go abroad or maybe apply during a year that they're doing it in a different place.
Bien, él nos cuenta que en el evento en el que estuvo presente en la Ciudad de México lo disfrutó muchísimo, que no sabía qué esperar, pues era un país al que nunca había estado previamente, pero que lo disfrutó mucho, que tuvo unas experiencias muy agradables compartiendo con gente de diferentes culturas y que le parece muy interesante que este tipo de contactos sean a largo plazo, porque tuvo la oportunidad de presenciar muchos proyectos, muchas ideas muy interesantes y que a la fecha todavía permanecen en contacto. Entonces reitera esta parte de que cualquier idea que se presente en proyectos como este, en eventos como este o en asociaciones que permitan el desarrollo de proyectos, siempre es muy interesante compartirlas y justo eso, ¿no? Que realmente fue algo muy interesante por la cuestión de compartir conocimiento y con distintas culturas y permanecer en contacto.
Oh, and one thing I didn't know before going was how much the countries, Mexico, Canada, and the US are working together to solve these problems, because really it's a global problem. And just like I needed a team to do this with the UVC technology, you can imagine it's even harder to do things that cross boundaries, and you know, that's really at a global scale. So it's just amazing to see that these countries are working together to solve such a big problem.
Algo que también le pareció impactante y que él desconocía era lo mucho que están trabajando México, Canadá y Estados Unidos vinculados juntos en esta área, porque nos podemos imaginar si a él le costó mucho trabajo haciéndolo en esta pequeña escala, que nosotros podemos calcular el trabajo que conlleva trabajar en este tipo de proyectos traspasando fronteras, ¿no? Entonces, que es algo bastante complejo, pero que está muy asombrado y sorprendido para bien, pues, que realmente haya tanto trabajo vinculando a estos 3 países trabajando en esta área, pues. Iris, no sé si hay alguna otra pregunta, algún otro comentario.
No, al parecer no. Agradecemos pues también al doctor Omar por generar este link, este vínculo, como comenta Adam, a largo plazo. Adam, thank you for sharing your knowledge. It's very impressive, your presentation. In this moment itself, we'll read for you something.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was really a pleasure.
We want to thank Adam again for your presentation, and we want, in name of Universidad Autónoma de Querétaro, to give you this certificate of participation in our event. And thank you again.
Cool, thank you.
Agradecemos también la presencia de todos los participantes. Seguimos invitándolos al ECOWAC durante toda esta semana. También, Itzel, si nos haces favor de hacerle llegar también su reconocimiento a Dani. Dani, también muchas gracias por esta traducción. Realmente sabemos que tenemos un nivel de inglés aquí dentro de la universidad, el cual es gracias a profesores como tú. Me considero también tu alumna.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Gracias por la invitación. Muchas gracias por la invitación. Un honor.
Gracias, Dani. Gracias, Itzel, por todo este trabajo que se ha venido realizando. Thank you, Adam. Entonces, pues nos vemos y cerraremos la sesión y la subiremos a las redes sociales. Realmente estuvo bastante interesante. Vale la pena, como dice Adam, seguir compartiendo.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for your attendance. Thank you. It was an honor.
Thank you. You were incredible. Seriously, that was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll stay in touch. Thank you.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye-bye.